Welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast, where we talk to C-level leaders from across the payments landscape. We'll be discussing the products and services that impact the payment space today, as well as trends and predictions for the future of payments. We will also hear stories from our guests about their journeys to the top.
I think the thing that we're best in the world at is actually it's how we combine two different things. The first thing being kind of that Silicon Valley product DNA, and the second thing being that channel friendliness. And I think it's our ability to do both really well is what sets us apart. And so what I mean when I say Silicon Valley product DNA is, simple, intuitive, software-led experiences for the end user and the small business owner.
That was Derek Webster, the founder and CEO of CardFlight, and he is our special guest this week. This is episode 96 of the Leaders in Payments podcast, and I'm your host, Greg Myers. And hey, before we get started, I've got an exciting announcement to make. Next month, July, is Women Leaders in Payments Month, and it's being sponsored by American Express. We've got an amazing lineup of guests that we'll be announcing next week, so stay tuned. A special thanks to American Express for being our sponsor. Now back to the show. Derek was born and raised in California, moved to Washington, D.C., and attended Georgetown University. He was an intern and then a product manager at eTrade, and then went to business school at Stanford. He currently lives in New York City, where he founded CardFlight in 2013. CardFlight powers a product called Swipe Simple that is used by 80,000 small businesses in the United States. Their hardware and software products are distributed by over 80 different partners, including merchant acquirers and ISOs. They are tech and customer first focused and are partnership led. During the pandemic, CardFlight launched the weekly CardFlight Small Business Report. It became the source of truth for how small businesses were faring during the pandemic for both investors and the small businesses themselves. On a personal note, he loves sailing and still races competitively, and more recently has taken up kite surfing. We've got a great episode ahead, so let's get started. Hi, Derek. Thank you for being here and welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast.
Thanks, Greg. It's good to be here.
So let's dive right in. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself, maybe where you grew up, where you went to school, where you currently live, a few things like that.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Southern California, in Irvine, California, about an hour south of Los Angeles, but moved to Washington, D.C. for undergrad. I was a finance major at Georgetown University. That's what led me into the payments industry, somewhat accidentally, actually. So I was interviewing for an internship at eTrade in early 2000s, and on the final round of interviewing, they were trying to decide a general internship program, but they were going to place each person in a division. And so for the final round, I interviewed with the head of the wholesale mortgage trading desk and the head of the retail credit card issuing business. And the reason the head of the retail credit card issuing business, actually went to bat to hire me had nothing to do with me, had nothing to do with my background or my skills or experience, but it was actually because I was on the varsity sailing team at Georgetown, and he had a boat on order and figured even if this intern turned out to be a total dud, he could make me wash his boat for him. So as a result, he went to bat and hired me, and that was my first job in the payments industry. I was fortunate that I didn't turn out to be a dud, so I never actually had to wash his boat, but I learned a lot about payments in that role where I was product manager, kind of leading a lot of their card issuing products for eTrade in the early 2000s.
Okay. And you're currently living where now?
Living in New York City. So CardFlight, I've been in New York City for about 10 years. I went out to business school at Stanford after eTrade, but after living in San Francisco for a couple of years, ended up settling down here in New York City, and that's where I founded CardFlight back in 2013.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about CardFlight. So tell the audience what CardFlight does.
So CardFlight powers a product called Swipe Simple that's used by over 80,000 small businesses for credit card payment acceptance in the United States. And we reach those 80,000 small businesses through the merchant acquirer and ISO channels. We've got a network of over 80 different distribution partners who provide Swipe Simple to their small business customers, including 10 of the top 25 merchant acquirers that distribute Swipe Simple. So everything from WorldPay on down to smaller ISOs distribute Swipe Simple.
Okay. And is it hardware and software or just hardware?
It's definitely in software. In fact, we have a lot of merchants that just use our software nowadays, especially in a post-pandemic kind of world, with a lot more touch-free commerce happening. But it's really differentiated through our software and the merchants that can have the ease of use of Swipe Simple in a web browser on their smartphones and tablets. And we do have a smart terminal product called Swipe Simple Terminal. We've got a kind of POS or cash register replacement solution launching later this year called Swipe Simple Register. So there are hardware offerings available, but what I'd say we're known for and differentiated through is just having a really good software-led payment acceptance experience for the merchants, as well as a lot of the tools and business management tools and reporting to help them run their businesses better beyond just processing a transaction.
Okay. And how big is the company?
We're over 50 employees and 80,000 small businesses that use us.
Okay. And are there certain verticals that the solution's better for, or pretty much any small business can run on the product?
So it's very broad. It's a broad base of small businesses. I mean, it runs the gamut from services to retail to food and beverage. We're the deepest in services, and that's everything from a lot of field services or on-site technical services. You can think of pool cleaners and landscapers and HVAC repair and nail salons and hairstylists and auto repair and everything in between. But we also have a lot of specialty retailers and boutiques and that use us. And then food service, everything, caterers, food trucks, delivery kind of businesses as well. So it's a pretty horizontal offering and that it works really well across a wide range of small businesses.
Okay. And then you mentioned that you typically sell through the partnership model. Are there certain types of partnerships that seem to be better or more successful than others?
I think we've been very good at building and supporting our solutions in a way that our partners can sell and support as their own. So each of our Acquire ISO resellers has a different go-to-market model they're using themselves. And some are using Google AdWords for lead gen and affiliates, and some are using trade association referral partnerships, some are using agents, and some are using W-2 employees and feet on the street. It's a real, or FI and bank branch referrals. We really see a range of ways that our distributors are reaching small business owners, and we're pretty good at supporting them through however they want to sell and support the product.
Okay. So in this model, they own the customer relationship.
They do, yeah. So they're providing the merchant acquiring and the payment processing services and doing a lot of the roles that come with that around risk management and underwriting and settlement.
Okay. And can they white label the product as their own?
So they definitely distribute it and resell it as a product offering of theirs because they're bundling it with the merchant account. We do have a white label version of our product that's available, but the vast majority of our customers actually prefer to market and sell it as Swipe Simple. We've just built up a lot of good equity and kind of feedback in the marketplace. And then we provide a bunch of other tools to support it. So you can think of, we have a support center online with hundreds of pages of content for anything from a merchant that wants to self-service kind of troubleshoot or learn more, or the support reps and technicians that are resellers that they may be new to our product or new to their customer. And so giving them the tools to get that information quickly is valuable. We have a content hub that the sales and marketing teams and frontline sales reps can access demo videos and one-pagers and the like. So I think there's a lot more to offering Swipe Simple that we bring to the table beyond just really good software and really good product. And so I think some of that gets lost if you try to white label it. But at the end of the day, we want our customers to be able to offer Swipe Simple in whatever way makes the most sense for them. And so we're supportive of white labeling where it's available.
Okay. I would assume that your business was affected through, every business was, but being you're working mainly through partners, but their customers are a lot of times small businesses, and the pandemic obviously affected a lot of small business. So curious how your business was affected or maybe things you've seen change during or since, I guess, the pandemic continues, but hopefully getting better. But curious is your experience going through the pandemic?
Yeah, I'm really proud of how our entire team at CardFlight responded in taking care of small business owners and taking care of our customers within the industry. And there's so many ways that we were able to very quickly adapt. We're a technology company at our core. More than half of our team members are software engineers. And so we've always been very tech first and tech forward. So I think moving to a fully remote model quickly, our team handled really well. And while no one was fully prepared for what happened, I think our team we we had a lot of the foundation in place. And then once we got our footing, which happened very quickly, we started saying, how can we help? And I think we did a lot of things there. One of the things we've done is just publishing what's been happening. So we now, for over a year, have been publishing a weekly report called the CardFlight Small Business Report, just to let everyone in the industry know what's happening. Are sales up and down? Are certain categories up or down? Types of merchants, types of transactions. And it's for a period there in kind of that peak pandemic of the second quarter of 2020. I mean, we've been putting this out weekly ever since, but we kind of became the source of truth for how small businesses in the US were faring and where sales were up and where they were down. And we had a lot of Wall Street investors that were using us as kind of the proxy for small business merchant acquiring because we had and some of our customers as well, they couldn't get the data from their own peers on how their businesses were affected and kind of used our data as a proxy. So we're very fortunate that we had a lot of contactless ways of taking payment, not just contactless in the tap to pay sense, but also, our virtual terminal and card on file and invoicing. And we've added a piece of software called Payment Links as well. And so we ended up having a lot of the small businesses that were amazingly resilient and just staying in business one way or another, even though they had to dramatically change how they were in business. And as they changed how they served their customers, how they took a payment naturally changed as well. And fortunately, they were able to stay with the Swipe Simple software throughout and continue to use us, just using us in different ways to run their business. And I think we ended up picking up a lot of market share through this period. I mean, our payment volumes are running almost 2x our pre-pandemic levels right now because merchants came to us because we had solutions. And even, merchants that might have had a hardwired traditional payment terminal suddenly pivoting to a curbside and takeout and phone-based ordering model really appreciated the flexibility of Swipe Simple, where they could, anything with a web browser they could take a payment on, or any smartphone they had, they could, use the Swipe Simple app on, and that helped those businesses stay in business.
Okay. What would you say differentiates your company from the competitors out there?
So I think the thing that we're best in the world at is actually, it's how we combine two different things. And that's the first thing being kind of that Silicon Valley product DNA, and the second thing being that channel friendliness. And I think it's our ability to do both really well is what sets us apart. And so what I mean when I say Silicon Valley product DNA is, simple, intuitive, software-led experiences for the end user and the small business owner. Our team, we are experts in navigating the complexity of what it takes behind the scenes to process a payment transaction, but doing so in a way that just makes things simple and magical for the customer, and speaking to them in English and not in payments industry jargon, and making things very just intuitive and effective. And I think we've got those customer-first design instincts and creating and just continuing to maintain and improve our software. And we're very proud of that. And then the other piece of this is that partnership-led model and that channel friendliness. And we work through merchant acquirers and ISOs they're different than we are. And we embrace each other's strengths and what each other brings to the table. And I think our ability to build and maintain those partnerships and to use them to scale and to reach merchants, that takes a lot of work beyond just having good product. And our team's really good at taking care of our end users as well as, all the channel partners that are involved in getting to them.
Okay. Curious your opinion on this, and you might read this in places that the kind of the ISO model is going away or diminishing maybe. Any thoughts on that ISO model that's out there today?
Look, I think the death of the ISO has been grossly over-exaggerated. I think there's a lot of value that any distribution channel that's reaching a lot of small business owners brings to the table. And I think where that channel has struggled has been in cases where they're not offering current and future generation technologies. They're not offering software-led solutions. Using the same business tactics that made sense 10 or 20 years ago is not a path to success. But I think writing off the ISO channel is also wrong as well. And so I think we've been really proud of the partnerships we've been able to forge with a lot of different companies that have a lot of different specialties and a lot of different areas of focus and a lot of different skills, and bringing them differentiated, modern, effective software that gets better over time, right? It's software as a service and not a shrink-wrapped piece of a traditional payment terminal is only going to get worse over time, right? Maybe the keys are going to get a little stickier, or It's going to get dirtier or banged up. Payment terminal doesn't get better over time, but Swipe Simple software gets better and better over time because we're continually updating it and that. And so I think the combination of being able to bring those kind of capabilities to small business owners and then leveraging, it's not just ISOs. We work with acquirers, we work with agents, we work with financial institutions. So it's not just the ISO channel. But at the end of the day, those people are active in their communities and they're active with the small business owners they serve and can be a great interface and bring a lot of value to them. And so I think we're proud to leverage that, but also, help them bring sticky solutions to the small business owner.
Okay. Where do you think the payments industry is heading, say, in the next 2 to 3 years?
It's going to continue to be software led. I mean, I don't know if this is 2 to 3 years or if this is 10 years. It's probably a continuum in between, but it's clear that the way we've seen software as a service play out in other industries. I mean, I don't know that many people that are trying to defend on-premise, databases as opposed to Salesforce.com and software as a service in this day and age. So I think it's inevitable that small business owners are going to continue to leverage software to run their businesses and leverage, cloud-based solutions. It's going to continue to be a transition. That's not an overnight shift. I think COVID brought forward a lot of changes that were already happening in terms of merchants adopting software-led solutions or things like NFC contactless. I mean, we're seeing 3 and 4x the volumes on contactless as we saw pre-pandemic. And so I think some of these technology shifts are bringing forward. But I just think that's a trend that's going to continue to play out. And as each and every merchant continues to evaluate what's best for them and their business, they're going to increasingly rely on soft to run their business and to take their payments.
Okay. I always have to ask the crypto question. Do you think crypto payments are going to become a thing in the next 10 years or so? Maybe specifically answer it around the small business space?
I don't know. I think that remains to be seen. It feels to me like most of the activity in crypto these days is around speculation, trading, investing. It's related to the underlying asset itself. I haven't seen for small business owners and mainstream consumers looking to transact, I haven't seen a ton of use cases where that's a superior way of doing things. And I think I'm personally long on the traditional payment ecosystems and the networks that the Visas and MasterCards bring to the table. The trust and the security and the acceptance points and the issuance points. I mean, the card holders, there's so many things that ecosystem has that I struggle to bet against it. And I'm not writing off crypto entirely, but I'd say, where we at CardFlight are making our bets are probably workflows that we see, bigger paths to scale at.
Right. And you mentioned contactless and that you've seen quite an increase there. Are there any other things like that the data has brought up that maybe pandemic related may just be signs of the times that the research can actually sort of back up?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen 3 to 5x growth as well. In addition to NFC contactless, we've seen those kind of growth rates within our invoicing product as well as within our card on file offerings. And so if you think about both of those are ways to collect a payment from a customer separate from providing the good or service. And I think that's something that did happen, I think, during COVID there was a decoupling of the payment from providing the good or service. Think of a plumber comes to your house to fix your pipes. Well, during the pandemic, you were trying to get them in and out as quickly as possible and not have them in your kitchen, taking out a dongle and you handing them a physical card and them handling it back. And so you started to see things move to a prepay model. Maybe they were collecting a deposit or just collecting your card details over the phone prior to them coming on site, or a post-pay model where they could send you an invoice and you click a link and pay the bill. And so I think a lot of the business owners have changed. There's been a separation of the payment from the transaction, meaning there's been a separation of the payment transaction from the actual, providing of the good or service. And I think a lot of that behavior I do think is going to continue. Those workflows are working for merchants. And I don't know that they're rushing to change back. But I think the beauty of products like ours is that a merchant can change their workflow without having to change their software. We're powering all of them, and we're not saying one's better than the other. We're just letting merchants decide what's best for them.
Right. Okay. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about you. You mentioned your first foray into payments was eTrade. So maybe bring us up to date between eTrade and CardFlight.
Yeah, so I was at eTrade for a few years, ran product development, product marketing for their card issuing business, led a few rollouts. They did a pretty big debit card launch that I oversaw. From there, I went to Stanford, got my MBA, and then moved to San Francisco after I graduated from that and joined the management consulting firm Oliver Wyman, which is a global management consulting firm, does a lot of really senior level strategy projects that were quite interesting. And relatively quickly, I ended up specializing in their retail banking and payments practice and ended up being an engagement manager leading a number of their payments projects. And so did that for a few years. Really enjoyed that high level strategic aspect of the work. But ultimately, I'm an operator at core and I want to be hands-on and I want to be executing. And so that is what led me to leave that behind. I founded a card-linked loyalty company called Local Bonus in 2011. And we built some interesting technology, but it was kind of a commercial failure. And in 2013, we kind of stumbled into the market opportunity that became CardFlight and then launched the Swipe Simple product in 2014 and have been off to the races ever since with building out a team. And now it's a pretty broad product line. I mean, our initial focus was just that kind of dongle on the go smartphone payment acceptance. But, over the past 3 or 4 years, we've just added a ton of just any way a small business wants to take a payment, we want to have a Swipe Simple solution for.
Okay. Have you raised money or has this been sort of self-funded?
We did raise money along the way, although we haven't raised in recent years as aggressively as kind of the traditional Silicon Valley back up the dump truck and burn a lot of cash on fire, light a lot of cash on fire kind of model. So we've been pretty disciplined about that growth. And the nature of our business model is it's recurring revenue. We monetize through the software as a service fees and kind of the per merchant per month kind of model that our resellers pay us. And so that's really allowed us it's generated a lot of profits that we in turn turn around and reinvest in research and development. So we basically take all those operating profits and use them to hire even more engineers. And that's why we have close to 30 engineers on staff. And just it allows us to build more capabilities into our product, which in turn allows us to serve more merchants, which creates more revenue, which creates more ability to increase our R&D capacity further. So we've largely leveraged that. But, in the early years, I think we raised cumulatively over a couple rounds, something like $10 or $15 million of venture capital funding across a couple rounds.
Okay. And how did you get from San Fran to New York City?
That I actually have my wife to thank. So my wife and I we met at Georgetown and had dated them, but were apart for a few years, including the bulk of the time I was living in California. But she actually is a heavy hitter in the fashion industry. And so she had moved to New York immediately after graduating from Georgetown while I was out west. And 6 months of trying to date, one of us in San Francisco, the other in New York, pretty quickly realized that having a 6-hour flight between us was maybe not sustainable. And she kindly suggested that I move to New York, which I did. And we got engaged probably 8-9 months after I moved to New York and had a couple kids since. So it's been a fun journey.
The rest is history, right?
The rest is history. Yeah, I've become a full New Yorker, so I now think and talk fast in a way I never did when I was a soft West Coaster.
That's funny. What are a couple of things you're passionate about? So maybe one work-related and one personal thing.
Yes, I mean, work-related, I love the role of being a founder and CEO, about having a vision for the future, but then helping lead and guide others to execute it. And it's just everything about the CEO role, working with customers and building those deep relationships and working to meet their needs and building a team and building a culture and working across all the different functional areas. Back in college, I was a self-taught coder. So, when everyone else had real jobs, the thing I did for my beer money in college was actually programming websites for people on a freelance basis from my dorm room. So working with our engineering team, I love. I mean, they don't let me anywhere near the code base for all the right reasons, but I can at least be conversant with them and key concepts and stuff. Our operations, our marketing, our sales, our finance teams, I love working with all of them. And so that's just been a fun journey of just building and scaling a company. And so I love that role. And I don't mind the fact that as a CEO, everything that goes wrong is somehow my fault, or everything that doesn't have a clear leader, ultimately needs to fall to me. I don't know. I find I kind of thrive in that kind of environment. I'm pretty good at owning things and taking responsibility and accountability when necessary. So, I enjoy that aspect of it. At a personal level, so I think I mentioned I was on the sailing team in college. That's actually where I met my wife. So I still race competitively at a pretty high level. I don't get to do it nearly as often now with 2 young kids at home, but when I can, I enjoy that. And then I've in recent years taken up kite surfing as well. So a little bit faster and higher speed and higher adventure than some of the sailing I do. But anything I can do to be on the water, generally outdoors and on the water, makes me happy.
Okay. And what advice would you give to, say, a college graduate who's looking at the payment industry as a career path? What would you tell them they need to do to be successful?
Well, so I think stick it out. I mean, the payments industry is a great industry, and I get that like fintech and all this stuff is hot now, but you can go back decades and just look at the growth rates of electronic payments. I mean, this is just a resilient industry that keeps growing and outpacing the growth of the economy as a whole. And I have no reason to believe that's going to change anytime soon. So I think the payments industry is going to continue to be a growth industry, continue to have a lot of opportunities. There's going to be changes, but there's so many opportunities there. So I think I never deliberately set out to build a career in payments, but now having spent almost half my life in payments in various ways, shapes, and forms, I love the industry. And I love the ability to kind of economically empower people, whether that be cardholders or small business owners. I love that that's the value we're creating. I mean, it's not life and death, but helping people with their money is pretty high on their list of needs. And so I find that very fulfilling. In terms of advice for others, I think I've found, I don't know that this is industry specific, but the more you can understand the needs and motivations of the people you're working with, the better. And to understand that it's rare actually that things are, someone else's needs and motivations are totally identical to your own. You try to find alignment and common ground and doing that as well. But the more you can understand, what is the pain point your customer is trying to solve? What is the context they have? What are the needs and motivations of employees as I'm building a company, right? And what people want from their experience working at CardFlight, what I want from having them on our team, they're related and there's a lot of common ground, but they're not identical. So the more you can understand the needs and motivations and expectations of people you're working with and speak to those things, be aligned to those things, deliver those things, the more successful you'll be.
Okay. Well, Derek, we've covered a lot of ground about you and the company and the industry. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Nothing in particular. I just want to say thanks for having me on. This has been a good conversation, good experience.
Great. Well, Derek, thank you so much for being on the show today. I know your time is very valuable, so I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Greg.
And to all you listeners out there, I thank you for your time as well. And until the next story.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Leaders in Payments podcast. Make sure you visit our website at leadersinpayments.com, where you can subscribe to the show and where you'll find our show notes. If you enjoyed listening, please share on your social channels as well.